G'day, my name's Topher. I've had lots of great questions following last week's video all about how the preferential voting in the lower house of the Australian Federal Parliament works. One of the questions is, why do we have preferential voting at all? What's wrong with just counting up the votes and giving the win to the person that got the most? Well, let's think that through for a second. Here's a hypothetical election with only two candidates. This candidate receives 55% of the votes represented by the marbles. This candidate, 45%. Well, it's nice and simple. We have a clear winner, the people have spoken, democracy is alive and well. And that's all well and good when there's only two candidates. The problem that we're seeking to solve with something like a preferential system is what happens when there's more than two candidates. Let's introduce a third candidate and see what happens. Let's say that this candidate comes along, says, hey, I'm going to run as well. And it so happens that they appeal to a lot of the voters that also find this candidate appealing. So now instead of this candidate getting 55%, a number of people who would have voted for them now vote for this one. Let's say it's about split, 50-50. Yep, I am definitely losing some of my marbles. Now what we have is a situation where this candidate still has 45%, but each of these only have about 27.5%. So all of a sudden, a different candidate wins. But the reality is, both of these camps would have preferred the other to win if their candidate didn't get up. And that's what preferential voting allows them to do. They can vote for the candidate that they prefer, and if that candidate gets eliminated, they can state who their preference is out of the remaining candidates. So in this case, let's assume that a few of them voted number 1 for this candidate and number 2 for this candidate. There's a handful that do that, but overwhelmingly, because these two candidates are very similar, they voted number 1 for their preferred candidate and number 2 for the other one that was maybe not as good in their eyes, but certainly a lot better in their eyes than this candidate. What happens? The preferences flow. And there we have it. We're back where we were before. After preference flows, we end up with a situation where the candidate that is, I guess, the least bad is how you could say it. The candidate that is the least bad in the eyes of the most voters ends up winning. Whereas if you just have, we count the votes and the one with the most wins, you're at the mercy of similar candidates running and splitting each other's vote. So that's why the preferential voting system exists. Now, last week I released a video on exactly how it works in Australia and how we can use it to teach the big parties a big lesson in the coming election. So make sure you check out the description below, click the link and watch last week's video. More than 100,000 other people have already watched it. Thank you very much to those people. Make sure you check it out too, so that you understand how preferential voting works now that you understand why we have it.